Despite delaying the game till May 26th, Rockstar Games has set the internet abuzz with the release of Grand Theft Auto 6's Trailer 2. Rockstar has since confirmed that Trailer 2 was captured on base PlayStation 5 and comprised of equal parts gameplay and cutscenes. Here with me to nitpick and discuss performance is Digital Foundry's Richard Ledbetter. Rich, welcome.
Hello there, pleasure to be here. Can't wait to talk about Grand Theft Auto 6. This trailer just came out of nowhere.
I think the entire internet is excited to jump in on this. And I think the first thing that stands out to me is just how is this possible on current gen base PlayStation 5 hardware? So, Rich, what are your thoughts on the performance from Trailer 2?
I think, well, the performance is basically 30 frames per second, which, is probably going to upset a lot of people. But ultimately, what you're looking at here is one of the most detail-rich presentations I've ever seen. Technologies that are just awe-inspiring, from character rendering to lighting to ray-traced global illumination to ray-traced reflections. To the quality of the animation, the direction. Where do you want to start? The amount of stuff that's going on here is quite phenomenal. And I'm kind of reminded of what I was thinking about when Red Dead Redemption 2 came along, which was what would happen if a developer is basically given infinite money to make a game. and at the time I was thinking, well, Red Dead Redemption is it. The level of detail there was just incredible for the time. However, now they've got if you can imagine it, an even more infinite amount of money to create something like this. I mean, there's crazy figures of like $1.5 to $2.0 billion being spent on this. But it's kind of like the Apollo moon program almost, in terms of like the video games equivalent of the expenditure here, because they know that, they'll probably recoup the investment within 1 week. It's going to be that huge. Just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So, yes, I mean, just watching the trailer here, it's there's nothing like it. There's not anything like it on the current generation systems. And so, yes, to talk about the fact that it's running on a base PlayStation 5, the standard model, not the Pro version, just like the first trailer, oddly enough, then, this is kind of like a statement of intent. This is, Rockstar saying this is what we've been cooking for the last God knows how long. I mean, I think wasn't Grand Theft Auto 5 like 2013 or something like that?
2013, that's correct.
Yep, so 12 years and an infinite budget effectively, and here we are, and it's looking absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think Rockstar Games in particular, as you said, when you are given unlimited scope and essentially unlimited money, you are given the reins to kind of make what you want to some extent. But I think what makes Rockstar Games so special is that their entire career has been very heavily influenced by cinema, whether it be the stories from their games or just the blocking in all of the cutscenes. And I think that what we see here in Trailer 2 in particular is this delightful blend of everything coming together that really showcases what makes Rockstar Games so special in terms of lighting, blocking, character acting, voice direction, and just overall tone and atmosphere in general. So, given what we've seen with Trailer 2, I gotta ask, just to distill it down to its essence, is there a moment in Trailer 2 that kind of made you take your breath and be like, oh my gosh, this is just I didn't think this was possible? Is there one moment or scene in particular that stood out to you?
No, all of it, basically. Basically, I think that's the big strength of it, just the sheer consistency from start to finish. There's nothing going wrong here at all. Yes, you can see that there are sort of technological limitations in place because of the fact that it is running on what is effectively at this point a 5-year-old console. So, you can really nitpick at stuff, but you're nitpicking within the scope of something that's just absolutely phenomenal. So, case in point, hair rendering in this game is like astonishingly good. It seems to be using like a strand-based system. So it's basically sort of actually rendering, to all intents and purposes, actual hair. But the fact that it's doing it with so many different hair types, and the fact that it moves so convincingly. The only sort of slight artifact to it is a bit of grainy noise to it, which is kind of like a a limitation of the current generation systems. There's only so much horsepower you can give to a hair rendering system, for example. So it has to be sort of quite imprecise. But there are some phenomenal things in here, like, light going through this guy's afro. It's not just the animation, it's not just the rendering, it's the lighting as well. Everything about this is just like quite phenomenal. I don't really know where to begin. I mean, my team spent 45 minutes talking about a 2-minute trailer, which pretty much says it all, really.
There's certainly a lot to unpack here. So just want to get your gauge on the lighting overall. Do we think that I don't think this is a case, but I feel obligated to ask, is this baked in lighting, or do we suspect that this is global illumination and some form of ray tracing and using some form of ray trace reflections? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely ray tracing. And that's another thing, right? Typically in a game, you only see like one effect, one ray tracing effect. And, it can be global illumination, it can be reflections, it can even be shadows. This one has got ray traced global illumination for sure. You can just see the way light bounces, that it's clearly RTGI. Ray traced reflections. Now, there's a particular shot in here where you've got a side-on view of one of the main characters in their car driving along. You've got ray-traced reflections in the glass at the front. You've got ray-traced reflections in the mirrors. You've got ray-traced reflections of the dashboard into the windscreen there. So, this is basically... it's almost like the rendering artists are just showing off at this point, because there's so much ray traced reflections going on in concert with the lighting. So there are actually two effects there. Ray traced shadows, probably not. They seem to be sort of more standard shadow maps in other games. But who knows what's going to happen on the PS5 Pro? I mean, they can definitely do the shadows, but this is the base unit, right? Looking quite phenomenal. I mean, you've got the trailer running in the background there. It just, every shot is almost like a masterclass in rendering.
It's captivating. It kind of distracts us mid-conversation. I'm like, oh my gosh, how is this game real?
So the character rendering is just incredible. There's also some screenshots on the Rockstar website you should take a look at there. You get some really good shots there. But, right down to the sweat, you can actually see a guy looking quite... sort of terrified because you see the sweat on him. You see the just the arm fuzz of the main guy character there. It's just like hair rendering on the arms. There's just a lot going on here. And there was the, I don't know whether this was official or not, but I think there was the story going around that it was delayed until May 26th next year simply because they wanted everything to be perfect. And based on, obviously these will be selective highlights here that they've chosen for this, but it's really difficult to find them putting a foot wrong in any of the shots whatsoever. I mean, it's already shaping up to be a masterpiece. It is quite interesting, though, that they are talking about this split between cutscenes and gameplay because, obviously it's got the cinematic borders on there. It is being framed as almost a cinematic experience. You're not seeing the standard sort of third-person chase camera view that you usually see in GTA, right? So I'm curious about this whole distinction that's being made between one and the other, the cutscenes and the gameplay.
There's moments in, like, if I recall in GTA 5 where we kind of get the seamless transition from like in-game gameplay to still in engine, but you cannot manipulate moments that are scripted in game. And I think we see lots of moments like that in this new trailer where, we see Jason working on a roof and slipping into his home. And it feels like that moment where we go from this, cinematic presentation to the over the shoulder. It looks like we are just milliseconds away from seeing a UI pop up. So it's just like, I'm so curious if that is the moment. We see a shot where Lucia is in a cargo plane, like near a landing gear, and there's a woman on top of her, and it's very clearly mid-mission action sequence. So it's these moments that I think are titillating audiences online everywhere.
Right.
Like, is this what this game looks like in action? But I want to go back real quick. You talked about how, how this is somewhat of a feat running on the base PlayStation 5. Again, 5-year-old hardware at this point. What sort of performance improvements do you think we could expect with something like PS5 Pro with the implementation of PSSR and potentially variable refresh rates with 40 FPS caps on 120 frames per second monitors and whatnot? Like, obviously all speculation on our side, but just curious if you think that's something that Rockstar could potentially consider.
Um, well, the CPU side of things is going to be key to this because they're running a hell of a lot of simulation work on this. And this is kind of like happens in every single game that they produce, whether it's Red Dead or GTA. Running this open world is not insignificant for the CPU. Let's put the graphics aside for a moment. So that is going to be a consideration. And the PlayStation 5 Pro CPU is only like 10% faster than the base PlayStation 5. So all of the simulation stuff that's happening will have to run at pretty much the same performance level as the base unit. So it would make sense that the Pro would be better used for the GPU side of things. So there's a whole bunch of options they could do there. Maybe there is headroom to get to 40 frames per second. We just don't know because literally nobody outside of Rockstar's headquarters that we're aware of has actually seen or played it yet. The obvious thing to do would just be to double down on visual effects. So we're looking, I think, at something like a 1440p resolution here.
Mm.
Well, 1440p if those black borders were removed. But you could increase the resolution. I'm not sure that would be a huge win. They could increase the ray tracing fidelity. So, but with that said, it's already looking quite good. Maybe they could add in those ray trace shadows that are missing. The other thing that they could do, well, possibly the increase in frame rate. I don't really see it. What's interesting is that there is some video on the Rockstar website of which it does seem to be 60 frames per second from what I'm reading online. I've not looked at it myself, but the fact that the trailers are all at 30, the fact that they've got this gigantic simulation going on. I mean, there's a whole lot of NPC characters milling about. I mean, I'm thinking back to GTA 4 in particular. The NPCs in that actually led a life to a certain extent. And I would imagine they're going to double, triple, quadruple down on that for this one. The amount of NPCs and their variety, animations and stuff, all seems to be quite unique. So what's happening there is just going to, again, really cause a lot for the GPU to be processing. And, just the fact that you're running an open world of this fidelity, I'd say anything above 30 would be a miracle, but who knows at this point? Yeah, I think we're probably going to be reliant on the PC version to actually see scaling beyond that, though. I think, but yeah, PS5 Pro, extra ray tracing, additional resolution, possibly. I'm not really sure I have any issues with the image quality based on this trailer, though. So maybe they will just double down on ray tracing. But maybe the game actually doesn't run at 30 frames per second at the moment. Maybe we're just seeing edited highlights here. Extra stability, the Pro would offer that if the base unit isn't doing it. So yeah, a lot of opportunities there for sure.
That all makes sense. And you touched a little bit on a PC release for GTA 6. Now, given Rockstar's track record with PC releases typically coming about a year later after the console release, do we suspect that this game will run well with current GPUs and current just hardware in general on PC?
Yes, because if you consider what the base PlayStation 5 is, it's like equivalent to like, what can I say? Something like an RTX 2080 or an RTX 4060, but with more memory. That's pretty much where, that's all entry level stuff now for a gaming PC. And that's running at 1440p at 30 frames per second, we think, based on what we're seeing in the trailer. So there should be scalability there. I think similar to what's happening with a game like Indiana Jones and the Great Circle or Doom: The Dark Ages. The fact that it's using RTGI is probably baked into the design. So you would need a more modern GPU to run it, possibly, unless there is some sort of fallback to a non-ray traced rendering setup, but not sure about that because it basically means that the developers have got to produce two different distinct lighting setups for a game of this size. It would be pretty huge. I'm interested in seeing the Xbox Series S version. That's going to be interesting because if you look at what Series S is, it has got essentially the same CPU as the Series X and the PlayStation 5, right? And it's got the same storage as the Series X. The only thing, there's two things that are different, three actually. First of all, the GPU is a lot smaller. But perhaps more crucially is the fact that there's less memory and lower levels of memory bandwidth. So that could be quite challenging for the Series S, particularly the lack of memory. When you look at this game and what it's doing and how big that world is, and the concept that they've got to fit all of that into a much smaller amount of memory, that's going to be quite challenging. So I think if we want to get some clues about scalability of GTA 6 on PC a year before we actually see it, the best case scenario is to take a look at the kind of nips and tucks they had to make for the Series S version. So, for example, I think they'll probably keep the ray-traced global illumination because otherwise, like I said, you've got to make two lighting systems.
Yeah.
But they could possibly drop the ray-traced reflections because the fallbacks there are a lot easier to do. It doesn't require, game-changing elements to the whole design of the game. So that's a possibility. But yes, I mean, hopefully by the time this comes along on PC, we would have reached the point where the sort of medium spec PC that a lot of people will have should be capable of running it. It's just possibly the guys with the 8 gigabyte GPUs that could have some problems there.
Now, you talked a little bit about the Series S being a potential measure scalability of GTA 6. Is there potential for further scale or further, I guess, investigation on the lack of Nintendo Switch 2 on that end title card for GTA 6? Like, is this just not possible at all, you think, on something like Nintendo Switch 2? And does that mean that there is a power gap between Switch 2 and the Series S in that regard?
Yeah, almost certainly. I mean, the fact it's not been announced for Nintendo's Switch 2 is, well, I just think that the amount of issues that they're going to be facing there in terms of CPU and GPU power, and the fact that they would need to produce a handheld version. So resources are already, relative to a current gen console, even a Series S. There's going to be challenges for the Switch 2 there, but then they have to scale it down and make it run on a much slower clocked GPU. That's going to be challenging. Memory bandwidth also drops again. Memory, they've actually got a bit more memory than Series S, so that's less of a problem. But this is a game that's designed for the current generation. Who knows when they would have actually received some development kits. I think, if you look into the last gen Rockstar Games, Red Dead 2 would easily be able to be done on the Switch 2. I don't see that being a problem. And possibly definitely GTA 5 because that ran on a PS3, so they could just scale up from there. I mean, it's quite crazy that you're thinking back to the last series entry, and it was a game that came out that debuted on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, and yet it's kind of persisted across the whole generation. It's had various upgrades for the PlayStation 5 and the Series X. And now the PC version has come along with the ray tracing stuff.
With
some
the
of which,
edition and
some of which seems to be quite reminiscent of what we're seeing in GTA 6. So I'm wondering if that was a bit of a run out for some of the technologies they're doing there. I mean, RTGI is in there, reflections, etc., etc. But yeah, I mean, this is just on a whole different level, and I do think certainly in the short term it's going to be too much for Switch 2, and of course GTA 5 and indeed 4 never came out on the Switch 1. So yeah, food for thought there.
Odd indeed, but I do not miss the Xbox 360 loading times for GTA 5. So hopefully those are a thing of the past. But there's been about a year of development between the original debut trailer for Grand Theft Auto 6 as well as leading up to this trailer. Have we noticed any significant improvements between the two trailers? Anything stood out to you as something that it's are we glad the game looks very different than how it did in the first one? I've seen the internet breathe out seemingly a collective sigh, I think in regards specifically to the kind of hair modeling that you called out earlier in this.
Right. I think the groundwork was laid in that first trailer for sure. The RTGI was in there. We weren't so sure about the RT reflections. And for the reflections in trailer 2, they've gone to town with a whole bunch of shots in there that just look phenomenal, which there wasn't really any hint of that in the first trailer. Could have been there, but they certainly weren't demonstrating it. I mean, the strand-based hair was there in the first one, but they do seem to have added a lot of variety, I think, in this second trailer. So, I mean, iteration across 12 months. Yeah, I mean, they can get a lot done in that time for sure. Yeah.
Well, Rich, thank you so much for joining me.
No worries. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I mean, I'm just sort of blown away by what's going on here, and can't wait to see more. But ultimately, I mean, it's over a year until it's actually coming out at this point, which is kind of like the ultimate tease, isn't it?
And if we've already seen a significant improvement between trailer 1 and trailer 2, I wait with bated breath for what will come with the full release, whether or not it does indeed release on May 26th or not. But if you are looking for even more GTA 6, because if you're like me, you're hungry for more, please make sure you check out Digital Foundry's channel, where John Linneman, Alex Battaglia, and Oliver McKenzie did a 45-minute deep dive into everything we saw in a 2-minute trailer. Apart from that, IGN also has a ton of GTA content, along with a very cool video on the 89 details that we gleaned from this 2-minute trailer. So there is a lot to unpack in those 2 minutes. But apart from that, for all things GTA, keep it here on IGN.